These were the standings going into the 13th and final round of the Tata Steel tournament. Anish Giri out ahead with 8 out of 12. Of course, he narrowly failed to defeat Foreest in the previous round. Then we had 3 players just a half point behind him: Fabiano Caruana, Alireza Firouzja, and we had Jorn van Foreest. Now, final round pairings, of course, absolutely crucial. And Giri had black against David Anton. Not an easy one to try and win. So that would give the chasing pack some hope. So Caruana had black against Tari. Well, not the strongest player in the tournament, so perhaps some hope there. Firouzja had white against Wojtaszek. And we're going to look at the game between Jorn van Foreest and Niels Grandelius. So Niels, well, I kind of feel a bit sorry for him because he was doing so well in the tournament, but had some setbacks, and going into this final round was on 50%. But this was a big opportunity for Jorn van Foreest, 21-year-old from the Netherlands. And it was clear from the opening that he really wanted to go for it because he played something very unusual. So it's a Najdorf, which has been getting a bit of a bashing in this tournament. And van Foreest played Queen D3, a really unusual move. I don't think this is going to be the refutation of the Najdorf, but it's certainly a bit different. Basically, white envisages castling queenside pretty early when you play Queen D3. That's one of the ideas. I don't believe it because the queen looks like it's on such an odd square. It's potentially vulnerable. It blocks the king's bishop. I don't like it. So this is what Carlsen did against Grandelius earlier in the tournament. And, well, Carlsen won. So interesting that van Foreest thought, okay, maybe this is a kind of a weak spot. I'll repeat this one. So if you recall, Grandelius played e6. Now, today he played knight d7, which seems entirely reasonable to me because, well, it's a classic Najdorf move, this kind of setup, and you don't commit your pawns yet. And you never know, the knight might be able to hit the queen. Bishop e2. Now, I remember seeing this before, actually. I was commentating on a game in exactly this position between Aparin and Nepomniachtchi. And that was in the Zurich Chess Challenge 2017. And Nepo just played g6 here, which I like a lot. Why not transpose into a kind of dragon, classical dragon, where the queen is slightly oddly placed on d3? Well, just a little digression. That's what Aparin did. So this is one of the big ideas of Queen d3, to put the king to the queen side and then basically to attack. But it looks so clumsy, and this queen has to move again. And basically Nepo just got really good counterplay very quickly. So I think g6 is just a sensible move against this system. But Grandelius went for b5, which is, you know, one of those Najdorf moves that you would like to play. But this is perhaps a little bit premature because it gives white something to nibble on here. a4. And van Foreest was playing pretty quickly. Now, you never really want to take this pawn. That just, well, defeats the object of playing b5, really. White can take back at some point, well, probably with the knight, actually. And it just looks a bit odd. And if b4 in this position, then the knight hits d5, and that also looks like it gives white what he wants, really. So knight c5 played, attacking the queen, which had to move to e3, which also doesn't look like a very good square to me because it's blocking this bishop. b4, I mean, this is obviously critical. Pushing the knight into d5. Now, you don't really want to take because that'll give the knight potential to go on to c6. But knight takes e4, so black has won a pawn, so obviously absolutely critical position. But Van Foreest continued playing very quickly here. a5. So that claims a bit of space. You never know, knight b6 could be useful. But now knight takes d5, queen takes, and e6. So black is still a pawn up. Castles. And here bishop d7 was played to cover c6. Bishop b7 is very interesting. It's normally the square. Of course, you want the bishop in these Sicilian positions. But very interesting idea here. c4, that has to be taken because there's a pin. And then bishop d1, bouncing off the back to attack the king. Crazy idea, and I suspect that's why Grandelius, after a little think, played bishop d7. But it was clear he was under pressure in this position because Van Foreest was moving rapidly, moving practically instantly. Whereas, well, understandably, Grandelius was having to think things through very carefully because it's such a tricky position. Here Grandelius played bishop e7, which looks like a really natural move to get castled. Now, the alternative is to play knight f6. But then the queen goes in, and this starts to get very messy, actually. White gets the pawn back, and there's potential to attack this one. Anyway, bishop e7 looks pretty normal. But after bishop f3, again played instantly, this is starting to look a little bit unpleasant. Black castled and queen d3. It's a really unusual idea, just this slow manoeuvring. Finally, the queen has actually found quite a decent square, actually. It's pretty safe on d3. And the idea is simply to exchange on d5 and take on b4, so white wins the pawn back and has, well, a very serious positional advantage. And it's not an easy position for black at all. We would perhaps like to play rook b8, but, well, a6 is on prise. So queen b8 played. Defends the pawn. But then c4. So because of this pin, that has to be taken en passant. And again, Van Foreest was playing his moves just instantly. And Grandelius had obviously been caught. So in this position, black is still a pawn up, but it's uncomfortable. So there are moves like c4 to consider. Watch that pin. Sometimes even bishop takes knight. But rook b1 attacking the queen as well. It's very unpleasant. I mean, one possibility is to give up the exchange like this. And hope that the centre and the bishops are going to pull black through. But, if you've studied that with white, then, I wouldn't fancy playing that with black. Rook a7 was played instead. Again, a very understandable move, stepping out of the bishop's line. And here was the first time in the game that Van Foreest actually had a bit of a think. He thought for 7 minutes over this position, and he said, after the game, well, yeah, it's true, my preparation ended here. Apparently his second, Dutch player Max Warmerdam, had shown him this line, and the assessment was a bit better for white. But at this point, he had to start thinking for himself. This, folks, is modern chess, modern professional chess. Rook b1. So it's a very natural move. The rook moves in to attack the queen, and the queen is really short of squares. If rook b7, then c4. That's not what you want. So queen c8, c4 anyway, driving the knight back. And here, an excellent move. by Van Foreest. Can you spot it? I'll have a slurp of tea, you have a little think. Knight b5. Great move. So that was taken, but now look. The rook's supporting the pawns and backed up by the bishops. Well, all white's pieces, it's really unpleasant. It's kind of unusual that white attacks on the queen side in the Sicilian in this way, actually. So Grandelius sacked a piece back. So black is a pawn up, but obviously it's looking great for white with this pawn on a6 locked in with the bishop and obviously the rook in dire trouble. In fact, Grandelius was still playing pretty quickly here. I mean, these moves are quite natural, but now he plunged in with bishop c7, sacrificing exchange. He certainly didn't need to do that. If he just moves his rook, he has a dominating position. It looks tremendous. So this is very tempting, but not strictly necessary. Grandelius took this, and here he still has a chance. He could have played knight c5, and this probably saves black, because after this move, well, queen d7 is the tricky move to spot. It's really hard to foresee that this is actually playable for black. If queen takes rook, then queen takes bishop, and actually black is all right in that position. It's just a very odd position for the queen and bishop. d5 was played instead, but this is looking absolutely dire. And here, actually, the simplest thing to do is just to take and play rook c1. That rook is, well, just completely trapped on a7, actually, and the rook is coming down to c8. That would be end of game, but things got a bit tricky again. After rook c1, rook e8 still keeps black in the game. I mean, it's very difficult. But now this really is hopelessly lost. There's no way for black to defend, because, you know, even on the king side with this, it's just dreadful for black. Complete domination. Queen c6. So the threat to play rook c8. Bishop d4 attacks the rook. Defended by the queen. f3, that's going to push the knight to a very awkward square. I mean, if it comes to d2, well, let's just have a look at this very quickly. You can take and play queen c5, and that is game over. The pawn is just going to promote. You can see the knight is completely out of play. So after f3, Grandelius simply gave up the rook. But now he's a piece down, and it is absolutely hopeless. He was, well, desperately wanting this counterattack on the king side to succeed. But once the queen comes back just to take control, then actually it's a pretty futile attempt. The queen covers some important squares and sets up some nasty attacks here. Rook c8. So the king was checked up the board, but actually it's quite safe. White is threatening just to take here and force a checkmate. So this was the only thing that Grandelius could find. Nigel Short got very excited on Twitter. He said, "A king march! Jordan, he's my boy!" And yes, it has a little echo of Nigel's famous king march against Jan Timman from some time ago. This one's a lot easier. Yeah, basically, queen g7 mate just can't really be prevented in any sensible way here. If queen d2 check, then just f4. So, well, a very satisfying way for Jordan van Foreest to finish that game. And so that meant he leapt up to 8.5 points. So, well, what happened in the other games? Well, Geary had a really rotten position against David Anton. He managed, through great effort, to defend and made a draw. In the other games, Caruana, well, he had some chances against Tari, but didn't manage to win, so that was a draw. Now, Alireza Firouzja, he had a very promising position against Wojtaszek. He risked a great deal, but it seemed to be paying off. It was a very long game. But very unfortunate circumstances. He's basically, after move 40, well, even if he'd won the game through the complicated tiebreak rules, he wouldn't have made it to the playoff. They wanted just 2 players in the playoff, and it would have been Geary against Van Foreest. He was told after move 40 that he wouldn't be involved in the tiebreak. His game was still going on. That seems strange to me in itself. And they were asked to move their board as well. Anyway, it was a very upsetting circumstances, very unfortunate. And Firouzja immediately made an inaccuracy, and that game ended in a draw. Now, like I said, even if he'd won, he wouldn't have been involved in the playoff, but clearly the tournament organisers made a very unfortunate blunder there, or the arbiters did at any rate. Well, I'm sure you can read all about that on social media, and you'll get the lowdown on that. Anyway, the upshot was that Anish Giri and Jordan van Foreest tied first with 8.5, and they went on to play a playoff, a couple of blitz games. And in the next video, I'll tell you all about that. So hang on, and more coming your way soon. Thanks for watching.